I want to turn to Heather Barr, who joins me right now. She's a senior researcher on Afghanistan for Human Rights Watch. She spent the last 6 years in Kabul, but is here temporarily. And Human Rights Watch has come out with a major statement on what's going on. What is it that you think needs to be changed? What's the greatest risk right now?
Well, I think we're seeing a whole constellation of different danger signs that have come together in the last 2 months. And you've mentioned several of them in your report. There are several others that have really indicated that there's a rollback on women's rights happening in Afghanistan that's starting now. It's not starting after the troops have gone at the end of 2014. It's starting right now.
And why?
Well, I think that there are people in Afghan society who are opposed to the progress that women have made, and they're seeing an opportunity created by a void that's being left by the international community as the international community runs for the exits.
And some of these laws, the funny name EVAR, the law against violence against women, and the quotas in Parliament. Is this actually part of the democratic process? Is this Parliament deciding all this, or is this coming from higher?
Well, it's a mix of different things. I mean, the sort of different danger signs I'm talking about, some have been from the court. You mentioned the Sahar Gul case, the amendment that seems to have been made to the Criminal Procedure Code, that seems to have actually come from the executive branch of government. And then we have the Parliament, both some parliamentarians calling for repeal of this law and elimination of violence against women that Fawzia Koofi talked about, and then this issue about the set-aside of seats on provincial councils. So these attacks are really coming from all different directions within the Afghan government.
You know what's extraordinary? When people like yourself used to say the international forces are running for the exits, well, US, Britain, the others would say, no, we're not. We're leaving a residual force. But now they're even talking about zero residual force after 2014. What hope is there for Afghan women and the men who are their partners in this progress that's been made?
Well, I think there's a very strong feeling in Kabul these days that the U.S. has stopped caring about what Afghanistan looks like in 2015 or in 2020. That they've had enough. They're tired of it. It's been a bit of a fiasco militarily. Everyone's sick of dealing with Karzai, and they've had enough of the country. But unfortunately, that punishes women for frustrations that they have with the Afghan military, with the Afghan president.
So what is your suggestion? Human Rights Watch came out with a bunch of suggestions as to what the international response should be right now.
Well, frustrated as the U.S. is, the U.S. has made a 10-year commitment to funding the Afghan army and the Afghan police force. And one of the messages we've been trying to get across to the U.S. government is that there needs to be a similar commitment to women's rights. There needs to be a 10-year commitment to funding the schools and clinics and hospitals and shelters and legal services that are really forming the foundation of a lot of work that's happening on women's rights. And there needs to be 10 years worth of political pressure and scrutiny on the Afghan government so that the type of things that we've seen over the last 2 months aren't just the beginning of a whole wave of rollbacks.
And if that commitment was made, let's hear what Rajiv Shah of USAID has to say on Thursday or later this week. If that commitment is made, can that help protect these gains? Or do you feel that once there is no international oversight, things are just going to be bad?
No, it can sustain that. I mean, international oversight doesn't require that you have soldiers on the ground. It's about paying attention and staying involved. And as long as the international community is paying for President Karzai's army and President Karzai's police force, the international community has leverage. They just need to focus that leverage on women's rights, which they have not done sufficiently so far.
And of course, the Karzai government can be, a little bit odd on all of this as well. They just went before a special UN panel to say that they're doing well on the Convention to Protect Women. Tell me about that.
Well, it was interesting. It was a very frustrating thing to watch. I mean, I think it's really powerful that these types of mechanisms exist, where a government is called to account for itself about how it's dealing with enforcing a convention. Unfortunately, a lot of what the government delegation said was vague, was misleading, was sort of dodging the question. But I hope they've gone home with a message that the international community is watching closely.
And people like Fawzia Koofi, of course, and their legions like her are really strong, really committed. They're not just going to lie down and take it.
No, that's absolutely right. I mean, the changes that have happened for women over the last 12 years in Afghanistan didn't happen because of international intervention. They happened because of Afghan women and men who support them. And the international intervention just created some space and provided some financial resources to support that. But they need that continued support to continue the work.
Heather Barr, Human Rights Watch, thank you very much for joining me.